That on January 11th of 1911, a huge cold front came across the United States. So on January 10th, it was 80 degrees here. On January 11th, it was 30 degrees. On the evening of January 11th, it was 10. On January 12th, the day of first flight, it was 30 degrees and the wind was blowing and gusting. So this is just like then, except we don't have the wind.
Yay.
And so you can imagine there were 17,000 people across the street to witness that first flight, and they spent all day out in this kind of weather with it blowing hard, waiting for a flight that took place in the afternoon. Before we get started with the program, we've got the Civil Air Patrol Squadron 388, the Phoenix Squadron, that's going to present the colors for us this morning. They're going to come right out here in front of the tent, present the colors. We'll do the Pledge of Allegiance, and then we'll get started with the program. So, present the colors, please.
Colors. Halt. Left. Peace. Present. Arms.
Follow me, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Order. Arms.
Carry the colors.
Right. Peace. Forward. Punch.
Got any young folks in your family who might be interested in the Civil Air Patrol? We have a unit right there. We do have plenty of seats here if you'd like to come in and sit down. This is not church, and we're not going to ask for a collection. So, first of all, again, I want to welcome you all here. I'm Jim Hodson. I'm the Executive Director of the Worth Aviation Museum, and this is the 104th anniversary of the first flight that took place here in Fort Worth, right across the street. Before we get started, though, I wanted to welcome a few people who are here today. First of all, is Andrew Ord here? Andrew Ord is with Greystone Development. They're the people who are going to be responsible for the park here. Eva Bonilla. Eva, are you still the president of the Linwood?
Chair-elect.
Okay. Eva's been very helpful here with the park and everything. Vernon Anderson with Bell. He'll be our speaker here this morning. Ann Zeta. Ann's right here. Ann is the councilwoman who represents this particular area. And let's see, is Jungus here? We have not seen Jungus. Okay. Zim Zimmerman is here with us today. Zim is another one of the council people, and he's also been very supportive of the things that we've done. And Steve Myers. Steve is one of the Tarrant County Historical Commission commissioners. He's here with us today. We're glad to have him too. Before I get started, though, I did want to make one short presentation. Somebody who has helped us a lot now. We've met him about 4 years ago, and he's been very helpful here year to year with the celebrations that we've done here in terms of helping with a lot of little things and a lot of support. He's become a good friend of the museum. So, Philip Poole, if you would come forward, please. We've got a certificate of recognition for Philip. Says this certificate of recognition and appreciation is presented to Philip Poole for outstanding generosity and dedication to community service and the support of First Flight Park and First Flight Day celebrations.
All right.
Philip has brought along some of the concept drawings of what the park will look like. I can tell you that year by year that we've done this, the park looks different every year that we've been out here. And one of these days it's going to actually look like one of these pictures. We know that. Also, you'll notice that there are, if you were here last year, none of these big buildings were here last year. And so this is part of the development that's taken place. And if you're interested, you can take a look at one of the townhouses here. Christy? Oh, right here, I'm sorry, she's right here in front. She's the rental manager, or the manager of the buildings, and she'd be glad to show you some of the townhouses later if you'd like. Now I'm going to give you a short brief on First Flight, what took place that day, and then we're going to let Vernon talk to us and give us his presentation. But 104 years ago, a group called the International Aviators that were formed by John Moissan, who was from Chicago. He gathered together a group of aviators, mostly Frenchmen, And they were one of the first flying circuses that was traveling around the country introducing flight to the communities. They had been in New Orleans just about Christmas time, and John Moisant was attempting to do an endurance flight there in New Orleans. And his plane crashed and he was killed. But his group continued to move on. You might recognize the name Moisant because that's the name of the airport in New Orleans. And it was named after John. Well, a couple weeks later, the group came here to Texas. They went to Houston, then they came up to Dallas, and while they were in Dallas, some of the businessmen from here in Fort Worth went over to see the flight exhibition there, and then arranged to pay the fare for the group to come over here to Fort Worth. They picked the location here because right across the street it used to be the Fort Worth Driving Park, which was a horse track. This was long before Montgomery Plaza was here, but the railroad was there. Airplanes at that point in time, there were very few airports, and airplanes couldn't fly very far, so they moved the airplanes from town to town on the railroad cars. So this was a perfect site for them. They could pull the trains up right next to the driving park and unload, put up the grandstands. There were already some there for the horse track, of course. And we also understand there'd been a fire in the grandstand, so they added some seating with beer barrels and planks so that they could have enough seating for everybody. The schools were let out for that day, so the reports were anywhere from 15 to 17,000 people, which was a good portion of the population of Fort Worth came out to see that first flight take place. As I've already mentioned, it was a cold, windy day, and towards the afternoon, they had already, a gentleman named John Frisbee would fly kites at these events. And it wasn't just for entertainment, but they could also lift people up, and they could also get an idea of what the winds were doing up aloft, and that's how the pilots had some idea as to what they'd be facing when they flew. They tried to entertain the crowd the best they could. They even brought out some race cars and raced them around the track. But by 4 o'clock in the afternoon or so, they were getting pretty ornery. And so Roland Garros, who was a little short Frenchman, he's in some of these pictures, said, "I think I will fly." And with that, he went out and climbed into his Blériot 11. We have a silhouette of one out here, so if you'd like to get some idea of what size that airplane was. And he climbed into it, and in that gusty, windy afternoon, he took off. Some of his friends tried to get him to stop from doing that, but he said, he told them, "Well, we don't fly, we don't get paid." So Roland took off, and he flew around the north side here for about 15 or 20 minutes, circled around and then landed. And that started a revolution here in Fort Worth. It still continues today. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. But that's what we're here to celebrate today, is that first flight. And a little bit about the ground you're standing on. This property was donated to the city in 1943 to be a park. The city had never done anything with this land. In fact, they had put the water line, the main water line for the city underneath there, and they decided that they may not make a park out of it at all until we came along. A few years ago for the centennial, we decided that we needed to have a state historic marker here. Part of that process requires that you get permission from the owner of the property to put up the marker. So that meant the city. So we finally worked with the city, and when they learned about the property, the city really even didn't know what the property was supposed to be for. We managed to have city council approve and have this named as First Flight Park. And so the other thing that we discovered as we did the research on this ground is that nothing's ever been built here. So that we are very sure that the day of first flight, people stood on this ground and watched that first flight. Like any air show, those people found out early on that only the people who pay don't get to see the air show. Other people around the area did too. And people were on rooftops and all over here watching that show take place. So that's the story of First Flight Park, or that's the story of First Flight. Now,
I'm a mother. I do everything with my team.
Well, I had to get a double medium egg.
Everybody else?
I do Friday because it failed.
Hang on. We got last two coming over.
Because I go in there for that particular one. You have to go in there and you order. I'd like a double. Take a medium one. What you're supposed to do is
Okay, we're going to launch on the count of 3. All right, on 3, we'll let the balloons go.
stop
Everybody
mine,
ready?
you wait. officially the shortest one.
About to
Well,
climb
it
right
might.
now.
I don't know. It's still airborne.